welcome back to another edition of Bailey Price Media Live.
Bailey Price Media, I like it.
What's going on, everybody? Happy Thursday. Welcome back to another edition of Bailey Price Media Live. Today, we got a very special show for you. Colorado Buffaloes analyst with DNVR, Well-Off Media, and you can check him out on Twitter and Instagram at Dukes the Scoop. Phillip Dukes joins the show. We're going to talk all things Colorado Buffaloes football as he's actually in Boulder right now, taking in Colorado Buffaloes spring practice and more. Can't wait to ask him that and so much more. If you're watching, make sure you hit that like button, subscribe, become a member of the Bailey Price Media Army. Today, we got a lot to talk about, including Colorado's Buffalo spring practice, like I mentioned. Brennan Marion and Sac State, they're actually trying to move up to FBS to become an FBS independent. They also hold the #1 transfer portal class in the FCS. We're going to discuss that. We're going to discuss Bill Belichick and UNC. Their staff has over 240 years of NFL experience. We're also going to talk about Geno Smith and the Raiders reaching an extension, which I'm pretty happy about. Shout out to Geno Smith. That and so much more. I appreciate you all tuning in. This is going to be a great show. But without further ado, Colorado Buffaloes analyst, my main man, Phillip Dukes. Phil Dukes, how you doing, man? I appreciate you joining.
Man, no problem, man. How you doing? I'm good, man.
Man, I appreciate it. I'm doing great, man, on this fine Thursday. Coming off a great show from Coach JB's show this morning, producing that. It was a great show. We had NFL legend Leonard Marshall on the show this morning, so that was pretty
nice.
You can hear stories about him and stuff like that. But, man, I'm doing great. And waste no further time. Let's get into it. You're obviously in Boulder. You got to hang out with Coach Prime and Miami Hurricanes legend Mel Bratton. Kind of talk about this. What does this mean to you? I thought this was pretty cool.
Man, so I was I was actually doing an interview with Uncle Neely in the recruiter room, and Coach Prime walks in, and he walks in, and Mel Bratton walks behind him, and I've been knowing Mel Bratton for about 20 years. He was a guy who helped me get break into sports about 20 when I was maybe like 25, maybe 24, fresh out of school. So, yeah, he stops me. He was like, Dukes. And he's like, man, tell Prime how I know you, or how we know each other. And I told him, and Coach Prime told him his story, how I ended up meeting him. And we just had a good time. They put me on a lot of game as far as sports media and just sports in general. So, and to hear them sit back and talk, share war stories about when they played against each other back in the day. So I think Coach Prime ended the conversation as he actually got a pretty big hit on Mel Bratton. And I don't think people really realize how good Mel Bratton was in his day. He was like Willis McGahee before Willis McGahee, as in he was the career leader in touchdowns when he left Miami and blew his knee out in the national championship game. And I think it's a drop. Maybe I think he was a projected first-round pick, ended up going 7th round. He was never the same. But back then, they didn't have the reconstructive surgeries that they have now. So, tough situation, but he made the best of it as he ended up becoming like director player personnel for the Redskins, worked at multiple sports agencies, worked with Eddie DeBartolo, where I worked. The DeBartolo firm is where I met him when he was working. And a great guy. So being able to have two mentors at the same time without expecting it was pretty cool.
Absolutely. And it's great hearing that from you. Amazing that you'd run into him like that. That's awesome. So you're in Boulder. Talk about just briefly talk about spring practice. What's it like being in Boulder? You happy being back there and stuff? And how's it going, man?
Intense. If I was to summarize spring practice in one word, it's intense. These guys literally are getting after it, the offense and the defense. Sometimes you have to dial it back because you have to realize you are still playing for the same team. But I'd rather dial it back than have to build it up. And I think the intensity has been so crazy that everybody wants to win every rep, whether it be in team or Indy, doesn't matter. They want to win every rep. And I thought it was awesome the way that these guys are going through practice. And even though it's an NFL-style practice, they still have like high school intensity, which I love.
Absolutely, man. Hearing the intensity, yeah, I'm excited. That makes me excited. I got to ask you, so Matt and I had you on 0 to 60 about a month ago, And we asked you about the quarterback battle. Kaidon Salter, obviously going into his 5th year, and then Julian Lewis. We know how talented he is. Now, how do you feel about this quarterback battle now that you're seeing it up close in person? Does Julian Lewis have a real shot at maybe possibly starting year one? Is it Kaidon Salter's job? How do you feel about the quarterback battle now that you've seen it in person?
I think the fact that we even call it a battle is a win for Julian. Because when you talk about a guy who was up for National Player of the Year consideration a little over a year ago, we're talking about a 17-year-old actually competing with the guy who's beating Power 4 teams and who's been a 4-star himself. He was a top 50 player. So for him to be able to compete, and I think that's a victory for Julian. But also the fact that Julian is making accurate throws, he's showing his cerebral nature. He's not the moment isn't too big. He's standing up in the pocket. He's climbing the pocket and make throws and making throws off schedule and off target, off platform as well. So I think Julian has shown a lot. With all that being said, Kaidon Salter is still Kaidon Salter. I think there's a lot to be said about how well he throws the deep ball. His athleticism has been on display. Today, I got to see them run a little more speed option, which I think is going to the more they run speed option, the more that's going to favor Kaidon Salter, who you have to give the nod to when it comes to athleticism. So I think just based on what the scheme is, if you want to go dink and dunk, I do think Julian Lewis will probably be the guy. If you're just going to air it out, you need short routes, intermediate routes. I think he would be the guy. But if you want to take some chances, if you want to utilize the run game from the quarterback position and take some chances deep, I think Kaidon Salter would be the guy. So I think just depending on what Coach Sherman wants to do offensively is going to probably dictate who wins the job.
Absolutely. And interesting. Now, I got 2 questions for you. I'll ask you about Salter in a second, but you mentioned both of their strengths. Is there a possibility that CU uses both quarterbacks going into this season? Is that a possibility?
I could see that. I 1,000% see a role where maybe you start K-Salt and you let Julian get his feet wet and some packages. Or vice versa. Maybe you let Julian come out and start the game like a starter, and you let K-Salt come in and kind of throw some things off and make the defense. I mean, imagine how tough it would be to prepare for 2 quarterbacks and 2 quarterbacks who do have those who don't have similar skill sets. Even though they do some of the same things well, I think they both throw the deep ball well. And I think I saw Salter throw some pretty nice deep outs today. He's got a cannon, like he does. I don't think I really recognized how strong his arm was until I saw it in person. But I'll say this: they're so talented. You got to find a way. Even if it's Jew, you got to find a way for Salter to get a package and vice versa because of the amount of talent. So I do see a world where that could happen.
Absolutely. And so let's focus on Salter. Obviously, experience going into his 5th year, coming from Liberty, 4-year starter, threw for over 5,000 yards, rushed for 2,000 yards at Liberty. Let me ask you, what is his potential as a starter? He seems pretty excited to be taking the reins from Shador. What do you think about his potential as CU starter going into this season?
Yeah, I think he can win 10 games with everything that's around him. I think that when you look at the Big 12, there isn't a boogeyman there. There isn't the UGA. There isn't the Texas. There are a lot of teams that have done well in the portal. I mean, you look at what Texas Tech has done, but when you have to replace the production that they had from their quarterback, who's now graduated, I forgot his name. Was it Tyler? Was it Tyler Shough? I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when you look at what they have to replace, and you go up and down the Big 12, UCF has a new coaching staff. I mean, TCU is looking to do some things, but I mean, Baylor won 8 games last year. I mean, there isn't a juggernaut in the entire conference. Even when you look at Arizona State losing Scatterbo, I mean, you go up and down the list. That boogeyman isn't there. So with that being said, I think that Colorado can capitalize, and with a guy like Salter, he's a guy who we've seen play well in big games. And another thing that I would say about him is his confidence is on another level. And you want a quarterback who believes he can get it done, and puts action to it. So I think his potential is out of the roof, and I think that if you can get their run game working and start taking shots and dial them up with the receivers that you have, and I think they will be getting some more guys in the portal. I'm sure of it. So I think with everything Colorado presents as an opportunity for Salter, if he seizes the moment, which I think he will, I think his potential is at least 10 wins.
Man, that makes me excited. Now, before we move on, talking some bigger topics, you mentioned the run game. That's something that obviously Matt and I have harped on for the past year. Going into this season, obviously they brought in Andre Gerard to go along with George Hageman and Gunnar White, and the offensive line, Marshall Falk, running back coach. How's that running game looking? Are you optimistic? Are we going to see some more looks, different looks this season? What about the run game? Go ahead.
I think the run concepts are going to be just as good, if not, I think they'll be better. I think there's going to be more of a focus on it. And I think no matter who is at the helm when it comes to correction and teaching technique, you got three guys who you trust. And I think one of the best technicians in that room is Gunnar. I think me being able to be privy to some of those conversations and looking at how he communicates, I think he's an excellent offensive line coach. Also, when you look at Andre, look at Dre, and you look at Big George, that room is a three-headed monster. And I think they're going to introduce some things, even as far as what they want to do as far as getting their guys playing more intuitive and not thinking as much. Those are simple things that provide large dividends when it comes to offensive linemen. So I think and the amount of synergy the offensive line room has with the running back room, how much time they spend together, I think that's only going to help the running game. And they just going to call more runs. I think now with Shedeur being gone, when you have the best quarterback in the nation, you put the ball in his hands. Now you have two guys in an unfamiliar situation who you're going to need to lean on the run game. So with that being said, I think I saw some improvement. I like what I saw today. I think Dallin Hayden's going to have a big year. I also think Michael Welch has a ton of production. Ton of potential. But I think Dallin Hayden's going to be one of those guys, man.
Man, that makes me excited to hear that. Going back to the offensive line real quick, I think George Hageman and them bringing in Gerard, I think it's going to be huge for Jordan Seaton's development. How do you feel about Jordan Seaton going into this season? Do you think he can become the best left tackle of college football?
He can, man. First one in, first one out. It's not even what he does on the field, it's what he does off the field. Like, get there early, see him, leave. I mean, he shouldn't even still be in the building, but he's there just on the training table, just like, preemptive work. Right? He's phenomenal. When you see him coaching his peers as a peer coach, a real leader, I think he's going to grow into that leadership role even more this year. When you look at the amount of time that he spent with Shedeur last year, some of that rubbed off on him. And as far as being probably, when you think about it, he's probably the most draftable guy on that roster. So I think he's going to step more and more into that role as a leader. And I think the sky's the limit for him. And whether he stays 3 or 4 years, he has the potential to be the first tackle off the board.
Man, that makes me excited. I believe that. I absolutely think, like I mentioned, I think his development going into this season, him being a real leader on that offensive line. We saw last season him as a true freshman. He was leading out there, man. And he's the young guy. That made me excited going into this season. I think his development is going to be take him to that best left tackle in college football and get him a high draft pick for sure. Well, let's move forward. Let's talk about this. So the NCAA denied Coach Prime and Fran Brown's request for a joint spring game. This is Phil Dukes. I thought this was really disappointing to see this, but we expected from the NCAA, who's obviously not fun and is going to play like this. So let me ask you, first off, what are your thoughts about Coach Prime wanting to face an opponent for the spring game? And you saw teams like Nebraska, Texas, Ohio State, USC, and others elect to not have a spring game. I thought this was a creative yet smart way to really capitalize on those spring practices and get some action going. Let me start. What are your thoughts on the NCAA denying this? And then have you heard from Coach Prime at all? What are your thoughts? Go ahead.
No. So as far as Coach Prime goes, we spoke briefly about it, and he's disappointed. I say that. I think that he's just the ultimate competitor, and I can say the same thing for Coach Brown. Coach Brown did a heck of a job recruiting the Atlanta area and the Southeast when he was at UGA before he got the job. So when you talk about two guys who are super competitive, two alpha males, and two guys who feel like you got to play football to get better, every rep is important. So these are guys who want reps against and not friendly fire. You want guys who you want to get out there and see what you have in the locker room so early, so going into the fall what's going to happen, and you don't have to wait until game one to see how people react under certain situations, under certain situations and certain stresses. So I thought it would have been a perfect match. 2 9-win teams, 2 teams that whose coaches brought them out of the doldrums, so to speak. I think Syracuse had it going before with Coach Dino a couple years ago, and then he just kind of struck a lull. It got mundane. It got boring. And Fran Brown brought him up last year with his style of coaching, and I think these two brothers like really feel like this is what is needed in college football, and they're going counterculture when you're seeing more coaches say, "No, we don't want you to see." No, they want you to see. I mean, you can even look at Coach Prime. Like literally, you can go on YouTube and find 6 practice videos. Like they don't care, and when everybody else is hiding, he's like, "No, we want you to see it." And I think Coach Brown last year when he had a couple of specials where they were showing how they went through practice and on ACC network, you can see him letting people into his world. So I thought it was a perfect match, and I don't think it's over with. I think maybe not for this year, but I would venture to think that in 26 you'll probably see, if not these 2 teams playing each other, these 2 teams playing somebody.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the NCAA is going to revisit it in the future. Now, focusing on this, I wanted to break down the NCAA's reasoning that they gave for denying this. I'll read off the 3 reasons, and I broke this down yesterday with Alcorn State coach Leroy Frederick, and he had a lot to say about this. But first reason, the timing of the request, noting most institutions have already planned their spring practice periods and some are at the end of or have completed their spring practice period. That's fair. 2, the competitive and recruiting advantage gained by the applicant institutions if a waiver is approved to allow these institutions to engage in activities no other institutions are permitted to do. I'll ask you about that. And then the third one, and this reason I think is complete BS, the potential academic impact associated with student athletes missing class time to participate in practice activities. The reason why I think that's BS, I'll give Syracuse as an example. You have ACC teams like Stanford traveling cross-country to Syracuse, Cal traveling cross-country, Miami. I think that's reason is BS. But Phil Dukes, what are your thoughts on the NCAA's reasoning behind denying the joint spring practices?
You ever ask like an adult for something when you was a kid and they said because I said so? That's exactly what all of that is. That's just a very, very elaborate way to say because I said so. There is not one good reason in there. I mean, like if they want to play, allow them to play. Like competitive advantage. How do you get a competitive advantage when everybody has the opportunity to do it?
Right.
Like, there are people turning down the competitive advantage. So, I mean, to even stage a game against themselves, people are turning down that option. So, yeah, no, I just think it's just we didn't come up with it, and we're going to make sure that when it does, that you guys know this the NCAA's way and not Coach Prime and Coach Fran's way. So that's all that is, man. Big brother just kind of, flexing the muscle a little bit.
Yeah, definitely. And I think this is a disappointing thing because I think more teams across college football than people might realize that we're actually going to embrace Coach Prime and Fran Brown's idea. One of those teams at Big 12, actually, Mike Gundy in Oklahoma State, he was trying to revive the Oklahoma State rivalry by doing a joint spring game or spring practices against them. And I wanted to show his comments on the NCAA denying the joint spring practices. Take a listen to this.
I think we should. I mentioned it the other day. I just thought of the deal with OU. I think it's a good deal. I would like to do it. I'd like to practice against them. I'll be honest with you. I'm not going to waste my time on who's going to determine what the rules are anymore, because essentially there's not really enough of them to follow, and I'm not even sure how they have grounds to say you can't do it. Like if somebody just goes and does it, what are they going to do to them?
Man, the Mike Gundy character. But Phil Dukes, what are your thoughts on his comments there and then other teams embracing Prime and Fran Brown's idea here?
Man, Coach Gundy told you who he was a long time ago. He's a man. I don't know how old he is now, but since he's been 40 years old, he don't let you know. So he's never been one to hold his tongue. So yeah, he's right though. Like he's I mean, what are they gonna do? But yeah, I like the way that he responded to that, because it's football at the end of the day, and you have to play. You're going to play it against somebody. So just let's go back to the essence of football, high school football. Spring football in Georgia is one of those things that if it ever went away, people would go crazy. I mean, jamboree games in the spring like that, like that's like the essence of football. Being able to hit each other for so long, and then you get to measure yourself against someone else. And I think that's one of the things that you could allow to help kind of restore some of the nostalgia of college football with how many changes that we're having. At least like everything seems so business, like everything seems all NIL and, TV rights. And we hear about all this high level stuff with the NCAA and the federal government.
Yeah.
Well, a simple spring game just sounds like I want to go to the spring game. And that's something that we're getting away from, right? And imagine having a jamboree, right? Oh, well, you have a couple of teams there. For smaller schools who may not be able to pack out the stadium, shoot, man, if you got 4 schools in a 75-mile radius, shoot, put them all together. Like, you play them, you play them. Like, there are so many ideas that you could really formulate around spring football, and I think it's just a missed opportunity.
Yeah, I agree with you. Missed opportunity for sure. And I'm like, Matt and I talked about this extensively. Like, it didn't even matter if it was a big school like Syracuse. It could have been like Colorado State, could have been Northern Colorado, whoever, Nebraska. Imagine that. Like, just any team. I think the idea of it, embracing that classic spring game tradition, as we see more schools across college football elect to not do a spring game for whatever, different reasonings, nonetheless. But man, disappointing. Hopefully the NCAA goes to resort and bring that back next season. You would think they would have to make this right, I would hope. But Phil Dukes, before we move forward, I got to ask you about Coach Prime and Colorado reached a massive contract extension, 5 years, $54 million. I think he definitely deserved it. He earned it. I've gone back and forth with Coach JB and others who say he deserves it but didn't earn it. Blah blah blah. I want to get it. I want to get it from you. Why does Coach Prime deserve this contract? How do you feel about it? This is something I'm really excited about. Obviously, Rick George and Coach Prime have a great relationship. We're working on this extension. It finally happened. What are your thoughts?
He took one of the worst Power 4 teams in the country and turned them into a potential playoff contender. Like, he was playing meaningful football in late November last year. A literal playoff. I mean, a game away from being in the playoffs. That's just it. They control their own destiny at the end. So there's nobody who is really revitalized the program in the country the way that Coach Prime has. He's one-on-one in what he's done, and we're just talking about football, basic football, and the staff that he's built, and being able to put kids in a certain situation that they wouldn't have had the opportunity before. Now, that's just football. When you talk about the economic impact of what he's provided to Boulder and the square radius of businesses around Boulder, and even reaching back to the other cities, Aurora and Denver and Louisville and Broomfield, and he's like a stimulus package for the city when it comes to football. So he earned. I mean, $54 million. I mean, it's people. You got to say something. Like Coach JV, man, shout out to him, man. He gonna say however he feels, and it's very opinionated, man. But at the end of the day, he didn't earn it. Bro, nobody earns nothing no more, bro. Like if he didn't earn it, nobody earns nothing.
I think he absolutely earned it, and I mean JB knows damn well that was a 1-11 program that Coach Prime went and turned around, and not just the impact on the field. I think we're yet to even see the impact. I think going into this season, next year, we're going to really see Colorado take a step up here and become really elite. But the impact, like you mentioned, for the University of Colorado, obviously Rick George and helping that school, and just the revenue bringing in everything else. I think he more than earned it, deserves it, and everything else. But nonetheless, Coach Brian, Colorado, 5 years, $54 million. Just had to get your take on that. Moving forward, I want to go across college football here. Ask you about somebody else in the FCS level. Let's talk about this. Brennan Marion, pioneer behind the go-go offense, former UNLV offensive coordinator, now head coach at Sac State. They hold the number 1 ranked transfer portal class in the FCS. And now this is new news as of yesterday. Sac State is filing an application to move up from FCS. They played in the Big Sky at my former school, Eastern Washington, against them. They played in the Big Sky to move up to FBS to become FBS independent. Phil Dukes, let me ask you about Brennan Marion taking over Sac State, having a great transfer portal class, and Sac State moving up to, or attempting to move up to the FBS here.
I mean, Marion was up for so many jobs, and he for whatever reason, this was the first head job or the biggest job he was able to land. And he's going to kill it. I mean, he's going to have that effect. He has a magnetism about himself. He has an offense that's very unique, that he's taking principles from multiple offenses and joining together, and it makes kids want to come play for him. he's been able to galvanize that fan base and the people around to want to get some NIL so he can compete against bigger and larger conferences. And it's only right that because he probably has already garnered, I can't say it definitively, but I would be willing to bet that he has the most NIL resources at the FCS level. And he's only been there, 6 months at the most? Not even 6 months, maybe 3-4 months.
Yeah,
a few. So I love what he's doing at Sac State. He's a major, like where I'm from in Atlanta, he's a major figure. He always spent a lot of time in Atlanta. So I think he's well respected. He's going to be able to recruit. He's going to get guys he's going to continuously get guys who may not who have the athletic pedigree, but for whatever reason weren't able to capitalize on their potential at whatever Power 4 school or whatever big time school they went to. Well, Marion is a guy who's going to take some of those guys that used to go to JUCO and bring them to Sac State. Some of these guys and Coach JP can speak to that. Some of these guys, as tough as you want to be, we've seen that some of these guys just need an arm around them sometimes. And he's going to be the guy who's going to be able to get the most out of those type players. And I think it's going to bode well for him. And I don't think FCS is going to be able to hold that team too long.
Yeah, absolutely. And like you mentioned, him coming from JUCO, I think he'll definitely be able to relate with his players for sure. We see him making an impact in the transfer portal, which is the biggest, you have to have that now in this day and age in college football. Now, let me ask you, Sac State moving up, filing paperwork with the NCAA to move up to FBS. Now, let me ask you, is Brennan Marion, he's the guy to lead Sac State to that FBS level and compete, not just move up a level and, just struggle. I think that they'll really, really compete, with Brennan Marion. How do you feel about them moving up? And do you think Brennan Marion will lead them to compete, so to speak? Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, you look at the scheduling, and when you figure out who they'll be playing, I could 1,000% see them in a what does New Mexico play in? Like Big West or Mountain. I can see him playing. I mean, he's come from the Mountain West. Yeah, I mean, like some of those Mountain West schools who aren't at the top, when you see some of those conferences, you look at some Conference USA schools who or All-American Conference, like guys who haven't really been at that top level. If you look at some of those lower tier schools, I 1,000% believe that he can come in and make a schedule enough to where he can be competitive to where you put a few of those big time schools in to, some revenue games to help you build steam. And then from that point, a year or two from now, you're talking about a real, maybe not a year or two, maybe 3 to 4 years, where you're talking about a real independent. And I think that's even if he were to get this program to a Liberty level, I think that would be huge, right? Like we're not saying they got to be Notre Dame tomorrow. We're saying, can you make it a respectable program at the FBS level? And I think you can. I think he has everything you need. He has the resources and the relationships. And nothing goes without players. And he's one of the guys who's been one of the better recruits. And you see the job they did at UNLV with the backfield that he's put together, at UNLV. So 1,000%, I feel like he can be a guy that can make an impact at the FBS level at Sac State. They just got to keep him at Sac State.
Right, just got to keep him there. But I agree with you 100%. I think he definitely is going to make an impact, and we're already seeing it. Number one transfer portal class. We'll see how that translates into Big Sky play headed into this season. But nonetheless, Sac State has filed paperwork with the NCAA, attempting to move up to the FBS. Big news there. Phil Dukes, talk about Bill Belichick in North Carolina. So their staff has over 240 years of NFL experience, and they have many ex-NFL guys, just like Colorado. Colorado, obviously, extensive NFL experience on their staff as well. Names on Belichick's coaching staff include his sons, Steve Belichick, former Patriot, and he coached him, Jamie Collins, legend, on that staff as well. Several others, Michael Lombardi, ex-NFL general manager, who's now their general manager. Phil, what are your thoughts on North Carolina staff having over 240 years of NFL experience, and then the NFL-loaded staff there? Go ahead.
Man, it's almost like the Wildcat offense. Once you saw Miami use it with Ronnie Brown some years ago, then you saw everybody else using it. Yep. This wasn't a real graphic to use until Coach Prime really started using it. So I think it was the smartest thing. Why would I see something that's working for somebody else and not use it myself? Bill Belichick ain't no damn fool. He was like, all right, what do I got? I got a bunch of NFL experience here. Let's promote that. cool. And I think it's a great idea. And he does that. I mean, Bill Belichick is basically the godfather of football under Bill Parcells. So why wouldn't he want to talk about the things that the thing that he knows the best, which is NFL football? So Super Bowl winning coach, coached a ton of players. His experience, hell, he got about 240 years himself. Like, I mean, been a coach since I'm 42. I mean, I've been a coach since I can remember. So,
Exactly.
1,000%. I think it's a good idea, and it's going to attract players. I got a good buddy of mine. His son went out there, transferred from Washington, Jason Robinson Jr., and they love it, man. Shout out to J-Rob. It was actually his birthday today, but they love the discipline that goes along with North Carolina, and I think the Belichick system may rival the Saban system, as you know they're good friends. So I think the systems will be the same, and now we just got to see if the results will be the same.
Man, absolutely. And I wanted to show David Andrews, one of Bill Belichick's players, actually spoke to North Carolina very recently. Take a look at this, and we'll react.
See what you guys do this season. But just look, buy into everything you got. Like, this is such an amazing opportunity for y'all. You might not realize it yet, but how fortunate you guys are to be here. So that'd be my biggest thing, man. You never know when those opportunities are going to come. You better be ready for them and don't have any regret. And understand that everything you're doing, whether it's Moses squatting, running, I could have gotten in the Super Bowl with the Falcons where we were in so much better shape. I can tell you a lot of stories about things that we did that I didn't know why we were doing them, but there was for a reason. So enjoy it, man. You guys have a great staff to learn from. A lot of guys with a lot of experience.
That they do. There's a lot of experience. But Phil Dukes, man, I think that's a huge thing that I don't think people are really thinking about, man. If he's recruiting, Bill Belichick, call Brady, call all these ex-Patriots, all these ex-guys, man. I think that's huge. What are your thoughts there?
I think the Falcons just caught a stray, first of all. Then
yeah, that's true.
I ain't like that, but yeah, I mean, shoot, I mean, like, there's only one coach that could rival the connections of Coach Prime, and that's Bill Belichick. So I would lean into it. If I'm recruited from North Carolina, that's what I lean into. I mean, you look at all of the Patriot way has been a thing for years. I mean, literally, 6 championships?
Mm-hmm.
Like, come on now. Like, what else do you want to say? Like, let somebody, like, wear your Super Bowl ring on a recruiting trip. Like, it's just, I mean, it's so much there that they can promote. And a lot of people thought that Coach Belichick wasn't going to be able to recruit at this level, but you got to recruit families. He just can't recruit 18-year-olds. He's got to recruit families. He's got to recruit dads and moms who remember how good the Patriots were and think. So, you know what, if I had a choice to send my son to a certain program, would I want to send him to a program that doesn't? Why wouldn't I want to? I'm going to phrase that differently. Why wouldn't I want to send my son to a program where the coach is the winningest coach when it comes to Super Bowls? So, yeah, I would be selling that every day and twice on Sunday.
Absolutely. And I really think North Carolina and I don't know how good the ACC I think has a lot of question marks going into the season. I think North Carolina is going to really be able to compete going into the season. We'll see how they address the quarterback position and stuff. But how do you feel about North Carolina going into the season in the ACC real quick?
Man, they had some replacements they needed to make. They lost a really good running back last year. I think quarterback as well, right? And they got a quarterback in the portal. So we'll see how that works out. Got a really explosive receiver there still. So I think offensively they'll be all right. I think defense is going to tell the story. With all the offenses that you got Louisville, you got Miami, you got Clemson. So in the ACC, I'm not sure they play these guys regular season, but there are potent offenses in the ACC, SMU. Like, you just go down the list, there are guys that you got to be able to stop somebody to win. So I think it's all going to depend on how well they can play defensively. I think they'll score enough points. I just want to see how will they be defensively. And if they win, I can see them definitely 7-8 wins if they can play a little defense.
Absolutely. And I believe I want to say the win total is like 7.5. So yeah, that's right in the range. We'll see. I think they're going to really compete. We'll see. This long off season, a lot of portal action, a lot of different moves that are going down.
Yeah, they weren't even horrible last year. I think they won 6 games last year.
Right, exactly.
With Mac Brown. So yeah, I can see that.
definitely going to compete. Let's go back into some Buffs. I got to ask you recruiting on the recruiting standpoint here. 4-star cornerback Dorian Barney down to 6 schools, decommitted from previously committed to Alabama, decommitted, if that's even a word. Now he's got 6 schools left. Is Colorado the school for him? Phil Dukes, what are your thoughts on this? He comes from the same high school as Julian Lewis.
Yeah, his dad. His dad is really big on discipline. That's one of the reasons when you look at the schools he's been to, Eagles Landing, where he played with Colton Hood early on before he transferred. Then he went to Peachtree Ridge, where he was basically the man offensively and defensively. And then he ends up at Carrollton last year. So his dad is all about the program. He wants the best for him football-wise. So I think, yeah, Colorado could be one of those teams that really you look, he was committed to Alabama, like who has a reputation for being a football school as far as being like that's your main focus, outside of academics. But they're really great kid, someone who has developed his game a lot over the past few years. So I just think that Colorado does have a real shot at it. But and to be honest, I don't think that's going to end up being his top 6. I think it's so early that there are going to be more and more teams. When you talk, like right now, when I talk to schools and ask them what their needs are in the portal, everybody wants a cornerback with length. Well, he's 6'1", 180 pounds. We don't even know if he's finished growing. Like he's what you want, really sticky in coverage. So I think that someone who could play man and zone, they're worth their weight in gold. So I'm not sure if it's over with as far as those schools, but as far as Colorado is concerned, I think they sit in a really good spot.
Absolutely. And I want to go on Barney's recruitment. I believe he had a FaceTime call with Coach Prime, quote, and said he doesn't talk to a lot of recruits, so if he's talking to me, he needs and wants me to come play for him. I want to show Rick George. Matt and I interviewed Rick George during Colorado's second bye week this past season, and Rick George talked about Coach Prime conducting these FaceTime recruiting visits, so to speak. Take a listen to this.
Back to when I was here in the 80s, it was all about handwritten notes. That was the only way you could get an advantage on anybody. But today, nobody does it better than Coach Prime. Nobody knows social digital media than Coach Prime. He can recruit to that. He sends out messages every day, and that inspires people. He gets it. I mean, he could do a home visit by doing FaceTime. I would have never envisioned that. And he's at the forefront of that.
Mm-hmm. Phil Dukes, what are your thoughts on Rick George's comments there? Prime doing these FaceTime visits, obviously different than Bill Belichick, who we see going everywhere, in-person recruiting, different strategies, but nonetheless, I think definitely effective. Phil Dukes, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, it's the difference because Bill Belichick is going to he's going to garner a different response than Coach Prime would going to different places, right? And I think as you see Coach Prime on Tubi, and he's been on reality TV for years, and you see him on NFL Network for years, and the greatest cornerback that ever lived, and all of this stuff that goes along with him. I think it's a safe space for him to really be able to be himself virtually. And his whole goal is to get you to come see what he's built. Because even when I talk to him, like I've talked to him about it, and he said, "Look, I can go to your house, that's fine, but why don't you come to my house?" And that's what he sells, and the guys who buy into that, they get out here. Because this is one thing. You got to see Boulder in person to understand it. Mm-hmm. I would have never thought about it. Like, you got to see the mountains over the stadium. You got to feel the altitude. You got to see the game day experience. Like, these are things that you can't get from, a house visit. So if we're going to spend time together, time spent is time spent. If we're going to spend time together physically, why wouldn't we spend time together and where you'll be? Because after this home visit, this is probably the last time I'll be in your house. But where you'll be for the next 4 years, this is where we'll be spending our time. So it is probably more important for him to spend that time in Boulder with these players. So I think he did a great job of utilizing technology in order to be in multiple places at one time.
Mm-hmm, absolutely. And man, I think it's revolutionary. It's interesting because I think it's only Coach Prime or very far few between can do that. It's the Coach Prime impact, because I don't think other college coaches can get away with this, and it's his strategy for sure. Phil Dukes, my final question before I get you out of here. I cannot thank you enough for joining. I really appreciate it.
Sure.
We've seen several moves across the NFL at the quarterback position that I think really are going to play an impact with the NFL quarterback draft, so to speak. Let me ask you, do you feel that the Titans are locked to draft Cam Ward? That seems to be the obvious thing here. They seem to be really, really interested in him. And with all these quarterback moves, obviously today, Geno Smith signed a 2-year extension with the Raiders. Well-deserved. Shout out to Geno, who I think is a top 10 quarterback in the NFL. But let me ask you, all these quarterback moves across the NFL, how does this impact Shedeur Sanders and his draft stock? Where do you feel he's going to go? Where's the best team that you feel it is for him? And what are your thoughts? Go ahead.
I think the Giants are the best team for him. I think they drafted him at 3. But the contracts I really keep separate, because you could have bet me my left kidney that the Falcons were not going to draft a quarterback last year after signing Kirk Cousins to $100 million guaranteed. And they did it anyway. So now it's like, you know what? I see what the Raiders did, but if they feel like Shedeur Sanders gives them the best chance for the future, they'll draft him. I see what the Giants did. They've only spent about, I think their total commitment and guaranteed money is about $14 million, 16 at the most, which is nothing for a quarterback these days. So you can see them draft Shedeur and still be under the league average of money spent for the quarterback room. So when it comes down to the first part of the question, as far as how do these signings impact Shedeur's draft stock or status, I don't think it has an impact, because NFL owners at this point are so hell-bent to win that whatever they feel like gives them the best opportunity to win, they will. Secondly, but I do feel like the best fit for Shedeur in the top 10 is the Giants. And I think when it comes down to the best team, I don't know how they get up, but I think the Steelers, if they were able to get into that top 10 some type of way, I think that's a team that's ready-made for Shedeur. You got George Pickens, NFL young boy, and DK Metcalf on the other side. So you got you got a great tight end in Pratt Freiermuth. Another good tight end in Darnell Washington out of UGA, 6'7" target. Offensive line is decent. The running game, you lose Najee Harris, but you still got Jaylen Warren. I think they picked up what's my man? I think they got Gainwell, if I'm not mistaken. I'm not sure. They did pick up another that type running back of that ilk. I had to check that out. And then defensively, man, you got T.J. Watt. So, I mean, that's almost a defense in itself. Like, I watched him basically beat the Falcons by himself last year. I almost feel like he threw a touchdown pass, too. That's how bad it was. So, I think the Steelers will probably be a wonderful fit for him. But as far as in the top 10, and if the draft stays chalk, then I think it's the Giants.
Man, that's an interesting answer. I did not expect you to say that, considering the Giants brought in Winston, they brought in Russell Wilson, paying Russ up to $21 million a year. Like you mentioned, you don't feel it applies, and you have a very valid reasoning for that. Your Falcons, Kirk Cousins, and Michael Penix. Shout out UW. I grew up in Seattle, but shout out to Penix. But man, here's my theory with this, and I want to get your take on it. The Giants, I believe that they signed 2 veteran quarterbacks because Brian Daboll's on the hot seat. He doesn't want to risk starting a rookie quarterback and losing, and he ends up getting fired, because I think if he doesn't win 7 or 8 games, he's probably gone. Now, my theory at the Raiders is this. Pete Carroll is a defensive guy, and we know that. And he obviously brought in Geno Smith to be his quarterback. I think there are too many defensive guys for Pete Carroll to pass up on, specifically the 2 Michigan guys, Mason Graham and Will Johnson. I've been saying this for a month and a half on this show. I think they're going to go Will Johnson at 6 at DB. And if they can get Jack Jones back there, I think it would be a pretty good secondary, but I think the Raiders need secondary help. I don't think they'll go Mason Graham just because they have Christian Wilkins, but possibly just because we didn't really see too much production from Wilkins after getting a huge contract. But the Jets at 7 are very intriguing. That's what my original prediction was. Matt's worst nightmares, I've been saying. They go to his Jets, and you know how he feels about the Jets. But I think the Jets, if you look on the optimistic side, are actually a team that are not that far away from winning, so to speak. What are your thoughts on my thoughts there? Go ahead. What do you think?
Yeah, no, they're built to win now. You think about Breece Hall, you think about Garrett Wilson, who we haven't even seen Garrett Wilson yet because he hasn't had consistent quarterback play. Now, even though he's putting up great seasons and statistically fantasy football stalwart, but when it comes down to it, we haven't seen his best self because he hasn't had anyone to get him the ball consistently. When you look at what they've been able to do on the offensive line and defensively, you got a guy at every level, man. You got Quinnen Williams, D tackle. You got the guy was supposed to be C.J. Mosley, but it ended up being Jamie Sherwood out of Auburn. And you still got Sauce Gardner, who I think has a point to prove this year with a chip on the shoulder after everybody said DJ Reed was the best corner on that team last year. So, and Sauce Gardner still has, pun intended, he still has the sauce, right? So I think at this point, I think the Jets. I've also said, even with the Jets, you still get the New York media, which I think Shador is built for.
Absolutely. I don't know if after the two quarterback signings with the Giants, I don't know if they go quarterback. I think Daboll's going to have to play to save his job there. The Raiders, I mean, I grew up a Seahawks fan. I'm a Pete Carroll guy. I don't think he goes quarterback in the first round ever. He's never done that. He didn't do that in Seattle. When he needed a quarterback 10 years ago, he went and drafted Bruce Irvin in the first round. JB and then he drafted quarterback in the later rounds, which if the Raiders go quarterback, I could see that possibly happening. But man, I think he either falls to 7, the Jets. Final thing, Cowboys, if Shador's there at 12, there's no way Jerry Jones is going to say no to that. Like, I get the Cowboys just traded for Milton today. Tennessee volunteered for briefly, but I don't know. Cowboys, any possibility there?
I mean, if he's there at 12, why wouldn't you?
Yeah.
Man, no, that's the first time I heard that. I didn't even realize I just forgot the Cowboys were so sorry last year. Like, dang, like, I forgot they got the 12th pick. Yeah. That's the perfect scenario, right?
Yeah.
Like, yeah. I mean, what number
does fall in the top 10, which I don't theoretically, I don't think there's any way he shouldn't, but if he does, there's no way Jerry Jones says no to that. That's just my thoughts.
1,000%. Soon as he is drafted, the number 1 jersey seller in the league. Shador, number 2, Sanders and Cowboys, 1,000%. Number 1, soon as it happens.
I have to be. Man, I agree with you there. That'd be moneymaker there. But, man, Phil Dukes, my man, I can't thank you enough for joining, man. I really appreciate it. You're somebody who had the honor to interview several times on Matt's show, and then I got you on my show. I can't thank you enough for joining, man. I appreciate you, and I hope you enjoy your time in Boulder. Enjoy the fine Thursday, man. I can't thank you enough for joining.
Yeah, hey, man, thank you for having me. It's always fun, man. I appreciate it, baby.
Absolutely, man. Enjoy the Thursday. Can't thank you enough for joining, man. Take care.
All right.
Shout out to Phil Dukes, Colorado Buffaloes analyst with Well Off Media, DNVR. He's got his own channel. Check out Dukes' Scoop on all social medias. He's the main man. Very smart, as you can tell. I had a great interview with him. Great perspectives on all the topics and stuff we discussed. If you're watching, go ahead and hit that like button, subscribe, become a member of the Bailey Price Media Army. We've been going full go this week, and we will be back again tomorrow for Bailey Price Media Live with a special guest that I will announce later tonight or tomorrow morning. I can't thank you all enough for watching. I'll be back on Coach JB's show tomorrow morning. Man, you just wait for that because JB's got a lot to say tomorrow morning. That's all I got to say to you right now. But, man, enjoy the Thursday. Great show. I appreciate you guys, and take care. Enjoy the day. Peace.